We are all set, of course, in this packed schedule of the Centre Court Masters Festival, where we take you from New York to London to New Mexico and beyond, looking at the tremendous range of early careers and specialized masters that so many of the world's top business schools offer. As you'll have seen from today's schedule, we'll be talking to people studying business analytics, finance, cybersecurity, but at the heart of the early career masters, there's the masters in management. And of course, one of the top schools in the world for the MIM is the London Business School. I'm delighted to be joined by Alexandra Salter, the Director of Recruitment and Admissions for the early career programs that London Business School offers, sitting there with that beautiful spring background, Alexandra. It's like this every day, right, in Regent's Park?
Every day.
And joined by Sophia Vessa. Sophie is a Master's in Management graduate from 2018. Rest assured, her undergrad at UCL was in European Social and Political Studies. But going to LBS, as she will explain to all of you, opened the doors to Amazon. She's now a team manager for their strategic vendor services. Welcome to both of you. Alexandra, perhaps we'll start just for a little bit of context about this very exciting Masters in Management program that you have, and how it fits into perhaps London Business School, its place in London, how that benefits from that, and then some of the details about the program itself.
Yeah, absolutely, Matt. So it's a 12 to 16 month long master's. The typical exit point is generally at the 12-month mark, but for those that are interested in doing an exchange option, we've got a range of exchange partners from NYU, who I think were just at the previous session, through to WHU in Germany, to SMU in Singapore. They're not all acronistic names, but we tend to do that in the higher ed industry. Or some students like to stay on and do an additional 3 electives at London Business School. So that's an option for people that potentially, want to specialize in a certain area. Maybe they come from a different background and just have a view to want to enrich their knowledge and just love LBS so much. They're really passionate about staying on. Being based in London, you've got obviously access to a huge financial centre, which despite Brexit is still incredibly strong and one of the strongest in the world. So it's a great position for those interested in finance, but also, most companies in the world are in London as well. Huge range of the FTSE 500 are based there, and lots of the companies that you would want to be working for have head offices in London. It's obviously a great time zone to interact with the rest of the world. And what's great about the program is that you really get exposed to guest speakers. Sometimes faculty ask their friends who happen to be, executives of some of the target companies you want to work for. Obviously, the London offices are not just recruiting for their London branch, but globally as well. So they will have people that have got their eye on, recruiting for the Delhi office, for the Madrid office. So it's a great place to, to work, to study. But even if you aren't thinking that you'll be based there post-graduation, you have the potential to, recruit from there for around the world. But the program itself, management, quite a broad exposure to finance, macroeconomics, as well as things like accountancy. Actually, a lot of people come out of the course saying that was their favorite and the one they were most surprised by. Maybe Sophie will disagree or agree. But exposure to things like marketing, but also things like performing in organizations and a lot of the strategy that underpins some of those disciplines. So I think that's a little bit of a whistle-stop tour of what we do, where we are, and why it's great to be there.
Before I find out if accounting was Sophie's favorite course, just perhaps in terms of where this fits in, you've got a world-class MBA program for people, in their later 20s, early 30s. You've got a Sloan program for mid-30s and onwards. There's the exec MBA. But this really is about early career, typically students with anything between sort of straight out of undergrad to up to 2 years professional experience. I love the fact that here we are in the week of International Women's Day, 56% women in the MIM classroom and 51 nationalities. So with those details, who is generally attracted to the program at this early stage of their career?
Yeah, it's a really diverse spectrum. So I'm sure Sophie will touch a bit more about her background, but it's, you know, from the people that are kind of the non-quantitative background and want to make that, or non-business background and want to make that transition, to those that already have had some exposure but want to sort of ensure that they can continue to grow. We have people that come from business backgrounds already, but yeah, come from law, humanities, languages, and are sort of using the MIM to take that kind of first step, or people that are looking to sort of enrich what they already have. A lot of people say that even if they've done business and management before, it's very theoretical, and what's different about London Business School is that it's a very applied approach to the curriculum that is very global. It's not just sort of UK centric, very case based, very interactive classroom, and you would also get exposure in terms of how that sits within the school. You will do electives, so alongside your core course you'll have 3 electives, and they sit alongside the wider community, so you aren't just in class with your peers, which are obviously a fantastic group of people, but you will be in class with those MBAs that, you know, are looking to maybe exit the consultancy service and become a tech entrepreneur, and you're going to be alongside those and really exposed to their insights, and it adds to sort of the rich and vibrant classroom, because they're giving you real world insights from industries that you're potentially interested in working for or may interact with, depending on what your destination is.
Right. So Sophie, you know, we mentioned your social and political studies. You'd had a year studying in Germany, an internship at Ducati and the roar of motorbike engines. So as you came out of undergrad and with the different opportunities that you had, your choice was to go straight into the Masters in Management program. What led to that choice? And perhaps, you know, with a background that wasn't deep into accounting and double entry, discounted cash flow and the rest, sort of your experience in terms of the more quant aspects of the program that Alexandra was describing.
Yeah, for sure. So as you mentioned, I did my undergraduate in more kind of social political studies. So I was really interested in international relations. I knew I just wanted to work in an embassy or in the government or in an NGO. It's really what I wanted. And actually through my course, whilst I found it extremely interesting and I got lots of benefits from it, I think I understood that before I could perhaps make an impact in these kinds of organizations, I needed to get a business knowledge, a bit of kind of, I guess, corporate, understand the other side of things as well, and sort of build my way. So I had done some internships, as you mentioned, throughout my undergrad, and I really understood that I was missing, I think, that business component. And I'd come across London Business School, and what I really liked is exactly what Alexandra mentioned. I loved that it was a very kind of hands-on approach. It wasn't just theoretical. It was more about how do we bring together, you know, the knowledge to make sure that it's applied. How do we make sure that we actually use it to improve our organizational structures and to actually make an impact? So for me, LBS just seemed perfect. So I chose to sort of make that step first before applying to other jobs. I had applied to some jobs and a few other things, but I knew that this would just help kind of propel my opportunities forward, even later down the line through the network and everything. So to the second half of your question, we did have a huge mix of people coming in. Some of my best friends were coming in from degrees that were a bit similar, so things like business, marketing maybe. A good friend of mine came from media studies, so he had spent the last 3 years sort of filming around New York City, completely different. Some of my friends had come from law, so they were qualified lawyers, but they wanted to get that commercial aspect as well. So a really, really diverse background. And I will say that maybe people that came from a more quant background did find classes like statistics a little bit easier. But then from my perspective, I found things like communication classes or performing in organizations a little bit more comfortable, and then maybe I had to spend a little bit more time learning about, you know, statistics and accounting, as you mentioned, and finance because I didn't have that background. But that was also why I had applied to the school to begin with. It gives you some really solid roots without necessarily going in depth as much as an undergraduate degree would have done. But it gives you what you need to be able to come in to an organization, have a really holistic view, and be able to understand a P&L, what's going on, and how to really make an impact across a number of aspects of the business. So that was my thinking and sort of what happened in the first few months.
So there you were through undergrad, maybe embassies, NGOs. How do you feel the Masters in Management perhaps brought a sharper focus to those next steps of your career? I mean, it opened doors to Amazon, which has arguably grown so big it needs embassies in countries around the world itself. But is there that sort of career accompaniment to really then sort of test those ideas and just get a sharper sense at the age of 22 versus the age of 18 or 19, what those next steps might look like?
I'm getting a message saying my internet is unstable. Can you hear me?
Yep, you're nice and clear.
Okay, then great. So, I mean, to be honest, as time went by, I did shift my focus a little bit more towards corporate, and I just found it so interesting, and there was so much that could be done. So I don't know if later down the line that's something that I'm going to continue to pursue. But having said that, I found what was really interesting about LBS, and whilst it's true that I think most people coming into the MIM are interested in consulting, there was a huge variety of interest about what the next step was going to be. And some of it, I do think a lot of people were interested in things like NGOs later down the line and making an impact, and doing something maybe a little bit more nonprofit, whereas we did have parts of the cohort that wanted to go into finance and tech, and myself included. So none of those opportunities were shut down. What I really liked is in the career center, there were people that were really focused in on every industry. So I could have had a chat with someone about tech, I could have a chat about someone consulting, and really, first of all, get a grasp whether it was for me, whether it was something that I thought would be great for next step, or whether it was something for later down the line. So I found that through the program, I was able to sort of refine what I wanted to do, but I didn't shut any doors. It's the kind of thing as well that you get to meet a network who is based all over the world in all kinds of industries. So if someone does change their mind later down the line, or if they're ready for the next step, LBS has prepared you to move into it through the people and the kind of background that it's given you.
Now, Alexandra, with your colleagues in admissions, you made a great choice, obviously, in offering a place to Sophie, but there you had an applicant pool. Someone been running around New York for 3 years with a camera. Others had perhaps had a year in a bank. You talk about looking for a track record of excellence, of achievement, even leadership potential. Now, this is an early stage, and perhaps for the MBA at the age of 28 or 29, 4 or 5 years of professional experience to demonstrate that leadership potential. How are you and the admissions team assessing that potential as individuals like Sophie are just coming out of undergrad?
Yeah, it's a great question, and one that applicants, I think, worry a little bit about. They see the word leadership and are like, oh, I'm not a leader, and that's totally fine. We don't expect you to be yet. I'm sure many of us are maybe a little bit older than some of these students and maybe don't feel like we've hit our leadership stride. I think it's always something people are learning and improving upon. I think we mean by potential, it can be assessed in a number of different ways. We really are looking at everything in an application. So it's not just about focusing on your great grades and your good GMAT, or, trying to make up for one that's maybe not so great. It is about, what have you done outside of your comfort zone? How have you pushed yourself academically? Maybe you took a module that was, really beyond the realms of what you would usually do. Also, extracurriculars are really important. If you've been able to be privileged enough to, get travel opportunities or study or work in a different environment as well, I think that really shows that you are somebody who's, ambitious, that wants to develop different skill sets, and that's willing to expose themselves to potentially being challenged or being uncomfortable. We're looking for people that are, resilient. There are things in your career path that aren't going to go amazingly well. It's the same in your academics. Our career center always show the career trajectory, and people think it's going to be that, and it's this, and that's fine. We want people that are able to sort of weather that storm. So it's through a number of different capacities. I would say don't get fixated that you weren't the club president, that's absolutely fine. Taking a step, doing something different, showing that you can support others, that you're community oriented, that's something that's really important to us at London Business School. And as Sophie said, there are people in the classroom where maybe she felt more comfortable in certain modules, so probably in her study group was then able to maybe take more of a leading light in some of the discussions or the materials. And the same, in the inverse, maybe finance, not something Sophie's been exposed to, but there are people that know how to read a balance sheet, and they are going to support you in your learning journey. So leadership potential is really about, can you, support others? Can you emulate some of those qualities that we would look for in great leaders? Not that you have managed super large teams or in organizations, or sometimes people in their academic life, depending on where you're from, don't even get that exposure because it's just not something that their academic path has placed emphasis on to date. But we would look for that, in other areas. It can be volunteering as well. There's plenty of opportunities out there. It doesn't have to just be things that you think are really formal and structured.
Sophie, you now do have team manager on your resume, and the potential that they saw in you that you've obviously delivered upon. I guess as you look back at that intensive experience of the MIM at the London Business School, how did you then sort of personalize? We talked with Alexandra about different electives, how you can really, shape that to the sort of path that you want to take. And beyond that, beyond the classroom, some of the club's activities that themselves were a wonderful opportunity for both personal and professional development.
Yeah, so I think what I not struggled, but what is difficult sometimes when you do an LBS just for 1 year is that there is so much at your disposal. You don't necessarily know what you can do to really kind of maximize your time there. So I tried to sort of have a mix of things, a mix where something that I was already really interested in, something that I was already knew I wanted to get into, and something that I knew would challenge me. So that I could get something out of the elective or out of that particular club. So there are loads of opportunities to get involved with things that maybe you haven't tried before, or things that you're really passionate about. There are fairs at the beginning of the year to really understand what you should get involved with. There's loads of information about which electives one should get involved with. There's lots of people you can talk to. Ultimately, I think it just comes down to what you want to get out of the experience, whether it's to prepare you for a particular career. So maybe you really want to go into real estate, so you want to do the elective that's real estate management. That makes complete sense. Or whether you're trying to maybe marry your analytical skills with maybe some more people management skills, or how to deal with an organization, how to be a little bit more creative. So it's about maybe understanding that balance and making sure that you get a bit of a holistic I guess, broad view of the kinds of things that you might be able to do later down the line, as well as do something that you're really passionate about. I think the year is not just about sort of building your career, but it's a really just fantastic year. So if there's something that's really interesting to you and maybe you haven't tried before, a lot of people have sort of taken a gamble and maybe it ended up being their career. People maybe took an elective about starting up their own business, and then that was the seed that they needed to sort of go out of their way and create that for them. So it's a challenge, I think, to figure out exactly how to construct the elective piece, but there's really no wrong way to go about it. It's just what someone prioritizes, I guess.
And was there a wow moment for you? Wow, possibly just in terms of, I never knew that about myself, or just a part of the experience that was so unexpected but so revealing from 4 years ago?
It's a good question, and it was a while ago. What I really liked is we had lots of speakers come in from lots of different companies and tell us, their tips for how to excel and how to succeed and things like that. And there were a few kind of things that stuck with me, and there were things that kind of stuck with me at LBS that transformed my experience, and I think beyond that. And one of the things that I remember hearing from one of the first speakers was, don't worry about being the best at everything that you do, but you want to be known as someone who's really special or particular in one aspect of your work or whatever it is that you're doing, so that people know that that is your specialty. That is why people come to you. That is what makes you special, and that is what makes you you. So it was about also figuring out, okay, when I'm applying to these jobs, what have I crafted here? what is it about me that will help me sort of stand out and take me to that next step. So I think just going to these talks and hearing really sort of senior leaders tell us how they've crafted their career, that was, I mean, it was amazing. It was really, really interesting.
Alexandra, as we think about all of these guest speakers, the self-confidence of these great tips, the self-awareness that it also brings. So when an applicant's thinking, well, yeah, I could jump in and do the Masters in Management now, the alternative perhaps is to wait another 3-4 years for the MBA. How do you help them think through those different options and perhaps respond to what would work best for them?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we would employ a coaching approach probably with most of the conversations we have. Ultimately it is the candidate's decision, and maybe path B is better than path A for different reasons, and that's okay. The MIM isn't for everyone, hurts me to say, but we're okay with that as well. I think it's about questioning, what do they want to get out of the next step. Sophie, you mentioned, just before we started the call that you had applied at the company you're working for now and didn't even hear back sort of before the MIM. So I think it's that kind of, are you wanting to make a transition? What kind of impact are you wanting to make? What's the caliber of the company you're looking to immediately join? Yes, there are lots of opportunities that you can join straight from undergrad, but graduate schemes, they are getting more and more competitive. There are lots of things that it's not just good enough to have some of the theoretical knowledge. A lot of it comes down to, your interpersonal skills. Are you someone they want on the team? And a lot of the time, depending on which university you've come from, which country, it will obviously vary. But speaking as somebody who's come out of the British system, that's not something we're very systematically trained on in terms of applying those interpersonal skills or the exposure that we've had. It may be that you've had several great internships and you feel like you've had that exposure and you can get on the job training. And I think you can. I'm not saying that doesn't exist, but I think the ability to sort of accelerate through those initial, first, second, third year of your career, I think that's where the MIM really kind of kicks in and comes into its own. You've already navigated some of these challenges, whether that be that you're working with colleagues, from a different global environment from you, and you're being challenged by the way they think and the way you think. You've already solved that through your study group. You already have a toolkit that's helped you sort of train for that. So I think it's that you can go in and meet some of those challenges just a lot more quickly. You're going to, there are some things that are you're going to fail sort of hard and fast on the MIM program in a safe environment. Not that you're going to fail the program, but there are going to be things where you don't win, and you're going to learn from that and learn to navigate it better next time. So you're not making those mistakes, I would say, in real time. But in terms of, do you want the MIM now? Do you want the MBA later? Some people do both. We've had people that come into the MIM, they launch their career. Some, depending on which sectors you go into, that sometimes consultancies want you to go and do an MBA, or you want to pivot into private equity and you want a different network, or you want to change geography, and it makes sense for you to take that second sort of educational step. So some people do both, some people do one, some people will do neither. But I think if it's something you're unsure of, reach out to your own networks, to look at our LinkedIn page, our student ambassador pages on our website, find out why people did make that choice, and does that resonate with what you're feeling or what you want to do.
Right. And with your business studies already behind you, Sophie, who knows, maybe you'll leverage LBS, apply to the Kennedy School public policy, and will become a future ambassador. It just seems to me that all the doors are open for you. So in terms of advice for our viewers, you talked about two pieces of advice. You talked about maximizing this incredible one-year experience. There are more things to do than you could possibly find time in the day for. So any advice for sort of somebody on day one, but also for anyone that's looking at the Masters in Management program at LBS, sort of holding up that mirror and say, well, think about this, and sort of support and guide their own choices.
Yeah, definitely. It's a great question. And I think it really depends on why you're doing the MIM. Are you doing it because, like me, you want to really learn all about, this everything about business and then go into a role? Are you doing it because you want to marry your business studies with a master's? Are you doing it because you'd like also to have the London experience? It really depends why you're doing it, and that should really help you understand how to prioritize your time. I think probably the most difficult time for MIMS is the first term, because that is traditionally most people applying to the MIM will apply for things like finance and consulting roles, or maybe traditional graduate schemes, which tend to open in the autumn. And that is when you start LBS as well. So you want to build your network. You want to, make sure that you're doing well in all your classes. You don't want to miss out on any social, but at the same time, there's that career aspect. So I think it's really important to prioritize and understand why you're doing the program and what you really want to get out of it. Having said that, I think long term, the main thing you do get out of LBS is the network. So it's super, super important to sort of marry your priority, be it, land a job in first term, with really getting to know people and leveraging that network. First of all, they can help you land that job because you can do interview practice together, or maybe they have some experience or a contact in there that can help you. But I think it's a long-term investment as well. These are people that are going to be your colleagues later in the future that can really give you career advice later down the line. So it's important to create those relationships in a really safe environment, as Alexandra said, and then you can take them further. So I would probably prioritize the reason for coming to LBS first, be it get a certain career or get a certain background academically, with really making the most of the network. And that could be through joining a club, or going out for socials, running for a position in the LBS cohort, or whatever that might be. And if you could just repeat the second question, just to make sure I'm addressing it.
Well, you sort of talked about optimizing that time, the network that then sort of gives back. But perhaps I'll just save the final question then. You're a wonderful ambassador for the school and the experience that you've enjoyed. So just very quickly with Alexandra, next steps. You talked about student ambassadors. You talked about sort of reaching out, having those conversations. Just in the coming months for our viewers, Alexandra, great ways to get in touch with the school, come and visit you. I'm sure you're organizing lots of virtual info sessions, for nationalities all over the world. And what would you recommend?
Yeah, we have got a plethora of events. It feels like we really do never stop. There's all sorts, recruitment and admissions focused events, student perspective events, specific program panel type events. We are also open. So if anyone happens to be in the UK, we have monthly talk and tours that happen on a Friday, so you can register to drop by. We're joined by our student ambassadors in person, which is a great thing to be able to say, but I think we'll be sort of ramping up on some of those in-person offerings as well. But yes, there's lots of online event access and provision through third parties. We're at some of the QS events as well in person. But yeah, our student ambassadors all have profiles on the website. LinkedIn's always a great way to find somebody who's gone to your dream school, got your dream job, the person that you want to be. People like Sophie, as you said, Matt, great ambassadors for the school. They're always on hand to engage in some of those conversations and take that further with you. Maybe don't direct it all at Sophie, do your own research. I'm sure she can't answer every inquiry, but yeah, we're very open, I would say, as a school. If you want to pick up the phone, email us over your CV, get started in that dialogue, we're happy to engage with you further.
Great. Well, I have no doubt, Sophie, that in the leadership role you have at Amazon, your days are very busy, and it speaks volume, the time that you've taken to join us and share the wonderful Masters in Management experience that you had at LBS. So thank you very much. And Alexandra, of course, for joining us at the Centre Court Festival. And for those of you that are watching either on the homepage or will be watching this in the days to come, as Alexandra suggested, reach out. There are so many great ways to get in touch for the school and find out why it might be such a great choice for you. But both of you, thanks for a great session together.
Thank you so much, Matt.